Good morning, friends, and welcome to New Garden Friends Meeting Digital Worship. I'm Margaret Webb. I'm the pastor here at New Garden Friends Meeting, and today is June 14th. And I want to open our worship by saying that we have never worshiped together before on Zoom, and I so love seeing all of your faces here on Zoom and getting to see you all and have that sense of community that we can have when we can see one another's faces. And to all of you, I want to say welcome to our worship space this morning. Welcome to New Garden Friends Meeting and this space that we create together here as a community. You are welcome in this space, no matter who you are, no matter where you are on your spiritual journey. You are welcome here among friends. Friends, we are all muted here on Zoom, and I know others are joining our worship on Facebook through Facebook Live. So there isn't a good way for us to greet one another verbally, but I want to encourage you to go ahead and send greetings to one another by text or by Facebook Messenger or by email, either right now as I continue forward with worship or after we close worship, to go ahead and send a message to some of your friends at New Garden Friends Meeting. It's so important that we stay connected and close with one another, especially during these difficult times. It's so important that we feel that connection of community. So I want to encourage you to reach out and stay connected with one another and greet one another this morning. Our announcements this morning will be brought by Karen Garaputa. She is a member of the Meeting on Ministry and Council. And for those of you who have worshiped with us when we worshiped in person back in March, you know that Karen has often brought the announcements for us at New Garden Friends Meeting, and we're so grateful for her ministry in that way. So Karen, you have some announcements for us this morning.
I do. Good morning, friends. So good to see people. Like Margaret said, today we are trying out having worship on Zoom, and it's also watchable Facebook Live today, June 14th, and also we're going to do June 28th. On June 21st will just be Facebook and on the New Garden Friends Meeting website. We hope that friends will let Ministry and Council know how the Zoom worship works for them and give us some feedback about that. Our second announcement this morning is if friends would like to support the meeting financially, you can do so by using the donate button on the New Garden Friends Meeting website or by sending a check to New Garden Friends Meeting. That's all our announcements for this morning.
Okay. We are now streaming live on Facebook.
Good morning, friends, and welcome to New Garden Friends Meeting Digital Worship. I'm Margaret Webb. I'm the pastor here at New Garden Friends Meeting, and today is June 14th. And I want to open our worship by saying that we have never worshiped together before on Zoom, and I so love seeing all of your faces here on Zoom and getting to see you all and have that sense of community that we can have when we can see one another's faces. And to all of you, I want to say welcome to our worship space this morning. Welcome to New Garden Friends Meeting and this space that we create together here as a community. You are welcome in this space, no matter who you are, no matter where you are on your spiritual journey. You are welcome here among friends. Friends, we are all muted here on Zoom, and I know others are joining our worship on Facebook through Facebook Live. So there isn't a good way for us to greet one another verbally, but I want to encourage you to go ahead and send greetings to one another by text or by Facebook Messenger or by email, either right now as I continue forward with worship or after we close worship, to go ahead and send a message to some of your friends at New Garden Friends Meeting. It's so important that we stay connected and close with one another, especially during these difficult times. It's so important that we feel that connection of community. So I want to encourage you to reach out and stay connected with one another and greet one another this morning. Our announcements this morning will be brought by Karen Garaputa. She is a member of the Meeting on Ministry and Council. And for those of you who have worshiped with us when we worshiped in person back in March, you know that Karen has often brought the announcements for us at New Garden Friends Meeting, and we're so grateful for her ministry in that way. So Karen, you have some announcements for us this morning.
I do. Good morning, friends. So good to see people. Like Margaret said, today we are trying out having worship on Zoom, and it's also watchable Facebook Live today, June 14th, and also we're going to do June 28th. On June 21st will just be Facebook and on the New Garden Friends Meeting website. We hope that friends will let Ministry and Council know how the Zoom worship works for them and give us some feedback about that. Our second announcement this morning is if friends would like to support the meeting financially, you can do so by using the donate button on the New Garden Friends Meeting website or by sending a check to New Garden Friends Meeting.
Thank you so much, Karen. Friends, I have a reading to share with all of you this morning. Our reading for this morning is from 1 Peter, chapter 4, verses 8 through 11. And I'm reading from the New Revised Standard Version. Above all, maintain constant love for one another, for love covers a multitude of sins. Be hospitable to one another without complaining. Like good stewards of the manifold grace of God, serve one another with whatever gift each of you has received. Whoever speaks must do so as one speaking the very words of God, and whoever serves must do so with the strength that God supplies, so that God may be glorified in all things through Jesus Christ. To God belongs the glory and the power forever and ever. Amen. Friends, we have an incredibly special event to celebrate this morning. Many of you know that it is Joyce and Bob Murr's 50th wedding anniversary, and I think today is actually their wedding anniversary day. And as part of our worship this morning, they are going to renew their vows. And I am so honored and delighted that they are using this space here today to affirm and reaffirm their love for one another. So Bob and Joyce, if you're ready, I believe that Bob is going to go first with his vows. Are you ready, Bob?
Yes.
Please share your vows. Mm-hmm.
Joyce, we have so much in common. Ever since we met, we have agreed on almost every political candidate. We have agreed on most political, social, and religious issues. We believe in reincarnation, which explains many of life's mysteries. Although we differ on God, we experience the Spirit as it leads us, directing our lives. We strongly live out the Quaker testimonies. Joyce, we are complete soulmates. You are attractive, intelligent, sweet, loving, and self-giving. You have a great personality. And Joyce, I love you. For better or worse, or richer or poor, in sickness and in health, till death do us part.
Dearest Bob, I cherish you and love you, and I promise to cherish you and love you throughout the rest of my life. I will be there for you in sickness and in health, in plenty and in want, in joy and in sorrow. I will stand by you in all circumstances. You are my soulmate, my best friend, and I will love you till death do us part.
Friends, I know that we are all muted this morning right now, but in your homes, please join me in celebrating Bob and Joyce, their marriage that they have together, and their 50th wedding anniversary. Congratulations to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark is going to bring our music, our special music for this morning. And the song that he is sharing with all of us this morning is one that was sang at Bob and Joyce's wedding.
Oh, perfect love, all human thought transcending, lowly we kneel in prayer before thy throne, that this may be the love which knows no ending, whom thou forevermore dost join in one. O perfect like thee, thou therefore assurance of tender charity and steadfast faith, of patient hope and quiet brave endurance, with childlike trust that fears nor pain nor death. Grant them the joy which brightens earthly sorrow. Grant them the peace which calms all earthly strife. And to life's day the glorious unknown morrow that draws upon eternal love and life.
Thank you, Mark. Friends, let us take a few moments to center ourselves in prayer this morning before I share with you my prepared message. Let's take a few moments for silent prayer. Amen. Thank you, friends. Joyce and Bob's vow renewal today reminds us of the beauty of love and how the power of long-lasting relationships of love can change and transform lives. For me, it is a particularly powerful reminder right now when so many of us need to be reminded of the beautiful and joyful things about life. The passage that I shared with all of you earlier from 1 Peter captures the necessity of love and also the power of love. Love is central to my faith life as a Quaker and as a Christian. Love is what I associate most strongly with the experience of the living presence, the living God. And I believe not only in the power of divine love to transform our world and our hearts, but also in the power of personal love, our love, human love, to change situations and people and even systems. The call in our passage for today is to live a life of love, which I think all of us know is basically one of the hardest things that we could possibly be asked to do. Love is hard work. It takes resilience and patience. It takes respect and responsibility. And that's just when we're talking about loving someone who we like. We're reminded in the Gospels that we're to love our neighbors, all of our neighbors, even our enemies, even those who we dislike. This is an encouragement to do something that seems almost impossible in our broken and hurting world. To maintain constant love, not only for those we like, but for all people. This passage also tells us that love covers a multitude of sins. I have to admit that the first few times, maybe even the first many times that I read this passage, that part actually made me cringe. In my mind, what that first part of the passage was saying was, go ahead and allow people you love to get away with things that you don't like. And that is frankly a terrible idea. Covering up or forgetting or not confronting or avoiding bad behavior of any kind is a recipe for toxicity in a relationship. When we do not confront, when we cover up and avoid problems, it not only can hurt interpersonal relationships, it can also damage society. Think about how our country right now is alive with the call that Black Lives Matter, burning with the fury that is backed by hundreds of years of racism in this country. We white people have spent too long ignoring or covering up racism in our homes, in our families, in our communities, in our culture as a whole, as Americans. Even good people who care about justice have spent too long covering up, concealing, or avoiding the sin of racism, not confronting it in the name of love and maintaining loving relationships. So for me, it's the second part of this passage on love that helped reshape my understanding of the first part of the passage, the part about sin and love covering up all things. The second part of the passage from 1 Peter calls us forth into holy action. Like good stewards of the manifold grace of God, serve one another with whatever gift each of you has received. Whoever speaks must do so as one speaking the very words of God, and whoever serves must do so with the strength that God supplies. This passage is calling us to a higher standard of behavior, a standard that is rooted in love. It's calling us to remember love in our words and to remember love in our actions. It's calling us to serve love as we serve those around us. And it's calling us to remember that our actions and our words and how we serve, all of that reflects the living presence in our midst, that spirit of love that is throughout creation and that is within us. With this second part of the passage, I can go back and reread the first part of the passage. I read this passage now to say that love covers but does not conceal sin. Instead, we speak with grace and with the Spirit pressing us forward in our actions. And sins are covered and transformed through this action, through the speaking and the service, through applying our gifts that God has given us. Sin is covered and transformed, not concealed. I want to give two illustrations of this idea. One that is really entirely frivolous and silly, and the other one that is very serious. So I think some of you may have seen the movie Moana. I think probably some of you have not seen it because I know some of you do not have young children in your lives, and it is a kids' movie. But if you have not seen Moana, you should watch it because it is a wonderful movie, even for adults. So if you have not seen the movie, then here's just a quick summary of the plot. In this movie, the heart is stolen from the goddess Te Fiti. And when her heart is stolen, disease and illness begins to spread across the world. And Moana, the heroine of the story, goes on a quest to return Te Fiti's heart to her. But the island that is the goddess Te Fiti is guarded by a terrible lava monster that's called Te Kā. And this is going to spoil it for some of you, but at the end of the movie, you find out that Te Kā, the monster, is actually the goddess Te Fiti, who without her heart has turned into the monster. So right at the end of the movie, as Moana is at the last point in her quest, she confronts the monster Te Kā, and she sings to her. She sings, "I have crossed the horizon to find you, and I know your name. They have stolen the heart from inside you, but this does not define you. This is not who you are. You know who you are." Now, I realize that this is a children's movie, and I don't want to minimize the depth and beauty of transformation. But I often think of this scene when I think of that idea of love covering sin. Because it is not so much covering as it is looking at and acknowledging. It's not so much covering as it is facing. It is not so much covering as it is transforming. Love allows the possibility of calling out bad behavior, and in that calling out, reminding the person of who they truly are, a beloved child of God, a whole person worthy of love. Now, the next example that I want to share with all of you is much less feel good because it does not have a happy ending. In the very early days of my ministry, I would often visit the elders in the community that I was serving and would provide them with pastoral care, just as I do now in my ministry. And I had several regulars who I would visit frequently. And one was a woman who was in her 90s. And she was always so kind to me and would just light up when we spent time together. And I came to admire her and care for her very deeply. She was someone who laughed often and who always had interesting stories to share, and someone who was so wise in how she looked at faith and her spiritual journey. And one day when I was visiting her, we had a conversation about how the community that she had lived in her whole life had changed over her lifetime. And she said something that was shockingly and horrifically racist. And I froze up, and then I turned the conversation to something else. I did not confront her or have a conversation with her about about what she had said. And rather than responding to what she said, I ignored it, which was, of course, deeply wrong. And I didn't confront her because she was elderly and because I cared for her. And I worried that if I confronted her, it would upset her, which I'm sure it would have. But allowing something like that to go unchecked isn't love. Love does not teach us to turn away from sin or evil. Love teaches us to speak with holy words, to serve with holy action, until hate is transformed into love, until sin is transformed into righteousness. Maintaining constant love for one another requires us to practice responding clearly and firmly to hate, so that in that moment we will not freeze up or hesitate when we see it. Maintaining constant love for one another requires us to learn how to serve those around us in such a way that we are calling them back to goodness and back to wholeness. Maintaining constant love requires that we learn to speak in such a way that the Spirit is speaking through us. And of course, the Spirit's words are always words of justice. They are always words of mercy. They are always words of love. The early Quaker, Isaac Pennington, wrote in 1667 to a group of Quakers. And this is the first part of the letter that he wrote. Friends, our life is love and peace and tenderness, and bearing one with another and forgiving one another, and not laying accusations one against another, but praying one for one another and helping one another up with a tender hand. These words to Quakers everywhere are as challenging as they are simple. And they echo with the ring of our reading for this morning from 1 Peter. Holding one another accountable, having hard conversations about sin, especially the sin of racism right now, not allowing evil to go unquestioned or unchallenged. All of this is the work of helping one another up with a tender hand. That is what it looks like to be in loving community. We should do this work with love, but we should not leave it undone. We should do it peacefully and with gentle and holy words, but we should do it persistently. And we should know that even when we do it tenderly, it still might result in hurt. But that doesn't mean that it is not the loving thing to do. Love has the power to transform evil in our world. But loving someone does not mean concealing, avoiding, or hiding from difficult conversations. This work is not easy, but it is the work that the Spirit is calling us to do. And as our passage reminds us, God will be with us in this work, and love will equip us to do the work that we are called to do. It may not be easy, but we must call one another back to our goodness. Love can transform all things, but the Spirit requires us to partner with it to do that work. Friends, we are going to enter now into our time of silent waiting worship. At this time, the feed to Facebook is going to end. And for those of you who are on Zoom, we will continue to worship together. And we're going to settle into silence together, and all of our microphones will be muted. So if you wish to speak from the silence and share a message with all of us today, you're going to have to unmute your microphone so that we can hear you. Friends, let's settle together into our time of silent waiting worship.